toward the One, the perfection of love, harmony, and beauty, the only being, united with all the illuminated souls who form the embodiment of the Master,
Messenger,
the Spirit of Guidance.
So welcome, everybody. This is our 5th class out of 6 on the Gabrielite Work. I want to review a little bit of what we've talked about so far. So in the study of uniqueness and the path, we were taught that each of us has access to a unique aspect of divine wisdom and a customized path that continually unfolds according to the way we fulfill our purpose. Then interconnectedness and multiple dimensionality showed us that the totality of the spiritual is constantly affected by what happens in the manifest, and that we inhabit a universe of more realms than we think. And then relational unity suggested that we are unique co-creators simultaneously in relation with everything else. All this is realized by the extent of our interfacing with the barzakh, or meeting place, and the power of our desires to create a beautiful world. Tonight we present the Gabrielite view of time and optimization of light. Now, each of these mysteries is an invitation for us to enter into. And I hope that you've been taking that opportunity between our classes. But next week, we'll culminate the series with how to activate our imaginal faculty. And in this study, we also call it the Sophianic function, to contribute to a new creation. So that'll be more about the how to and how to continue and how to enter into all these mysteries. But tonight we'll begin with time. And I have something special for you here, in that it's a personal story related to time. And it came to mind at a very special time for Azarbash and myself in the life and death of our son, David, who passed away when he was 13. It was very sudden. Later in the same day that he passed away, I was trying to figure out, well, does Dave still have a personality? Or has he merged back into the cloud of beingness? Where was my son? I asked Don's brother, Bob, who had come to see us later in the same day that this happened. Bob said to me, well, sure, he still has his personality. He's not just in a cloud of beingness. He also has his sense of humor and all the great things. He's still there. So I was still trying to come to terms with where this would be, and what would his individuality be like, and would it be retained after he died? And I said to Bob, and by the way, Bob was very similar to Dave in his personality, especially about his sense of humor. And I said to him, do you think he still has that sense of humor that you do, Bob? Dave used to joke around and say things like that when we'd heard them, we would say to him, you can't talk like that. That's not how people relate to each other. But he would say it, and Bob would say the same kind of things too. And Dave died on August 3rd, which was also Bob's birthday. A subplot of what happened on that day then would be that Bob would never, and he would never have brought it up, but it forever changed the mood of August 3rd for him. His birthday would never be the same. I decided if Dave's personality was still there and he had a sense of humor, he might be able to communicate with us by way of the Far Side calendar, which he loved the Far Side jokes so much. And we had, Bob and I were sitting in Azerbaijan's office at that time, and there was the Far Side calendar there. And I thought, wow, I'd like to see what it says about August 3rd. Here's where the time thing came in. Because, of course, whatever was written on the Far Side calendar had been printed a long time ago. And before that, people had to decide what to put in the picture on the Far Side calendar. Well, here goes. So I looked over at Don's desk at the moment that I saw the Far Side calendar. That's the dry kind of humor that Dave had and Bob shared. So I thought, why don't I see what cartoon is portrayed on the calendar on August 3rd? There was a picture of people in death shrouds. Several people like at a cocktail party. One was saying to the other, "So Bob, how's death been treating you lately?" Whoa. The answer to that was that it had ruined his birthday. That's the kind of humor that Dave would have said to somebody in a strange and dry way. Here he was laughing about his own death. And the point of it, as far as time was concerned, was, how can this have happened, that this joke, directly talking about Bob, whose birthday had been ruined, was questioned, how's been death treating you lately? Well, in a shocking day like that was, this was a welcome linking up and feeling that there's some purpose in things, and somehow things are connected in a way that we really don't have very much understanding of. And somehow things can feed back, things can loop, things can influence each other. So I was really connected in a way that was very helpful to me in a very crucial time of our life. Do you want to end, do you think?
Well, I will mention a phenomena that has been verified in physics called retrocausality. So our normal perception of time is the linear arrow of time. The past, we're in the present. Time is moving towards the future. We can see the clock ticking, the hands moving, and so on. But actually, as Einstein showed, time is relative and it depends on a frame of reference. So it could be equally valid for some beings in a different part of the universe moving relative to us, that it would seem like they're going backwards in time, but their time seems perfectly normal to them, and so on. And they've done some experiments recently. There's a phenomena in physics called entanglement, where you have two particles. Let's say one has an upspin and the other has a downspin, and they always have to be in that relationship, so that if you force the spin of one to change from down to up, instantly the other one changes from up to down, and it's not local. It doesn't matter how far apart they are. So that's already pretty remarkable. It's what Einstein called spooky action at a distance. But they found that this phenomena also exists across time. So there's time entanglement. So here's the really amazing thing. They did an experiment where they entangled two particles that never existed at the same time in the universe. So one had been there and it was destroyed, and later in time there was another one, but somehow these were entangled with each other. How can something be entangled with something that doesn't exist at the same time? Well, we talk about the Gabrielite mysteries, and there's many mysteries in physics. So and I'll make one more mention of some research they did with random number generators, where they found that people could change the output that had been stored on a computer disk from the previous day. So it's like you come into the lab today, your instructions are see if you can change what happened yesterday between 2 and 3 in the afternoon. And as long as it wasn't printed out already and no one looked at it, that would be the only time of day that it changed. So these kinds of things really boggle our notion of what time is about. But time, originally we called this mystery, time is not what you think, and it definitely isn't.
Well, the Sufis have said, Ibn Arabi in particular, that there's a new creation that arises at every instant. So it's meaning that we can be a part of a new creation at every moment. That we usually think that things have been set up for quite a long time, and one era came upon another era all the way down through the centuries, and now here we are, and we are separated from creation by all these hundreds, thousands of years. But no, the Sufis say that it's recreated at every instant, so that there's a circulation through all of time from this moment all the way back to the beginning of time. We are not aware of that, but this is what we are challenged to enter into and begin to activate. And the opportunity is humongous, and little things and significant things that we've spoken about that show that there is an interaction that is way different than this long, continuous time flow that we think is happening. But it's awfully strong, this illusion that all of us share, but there's no way to get back to that one creative moment.
I have to interject a little humor that I saw today on a Facebook post. So this was supposedly a true story that a parent called his teenage son on the phone. The son was upstairs, and the son answered, and the father said, because it ruins the punchline, and then he hung up. So then his son comes down the stairs and says, what are you talking about? And then the father says, what's the problem with time travel?
Okay.
Think about it.
That's pretty good.
But, with us, that's a humorous way of looking at it. But we think of history as being fixed. And like Ravani Rao was saying, even though the Sufis say there's a new creation at every instant, we expect the future to be just a linear extrapolation of the way that things have been, and maybe with a little difference here and there. But we don't expect some major breakthroughs. And a Sufi that lived hundreds of years ago said, oh man, if you but knew that you're free, it's your thought of captivity that keeps you in chains. Well, a modern way of thinking about that is it's your fixed vantage point, that you're stuck in a notion that you just exist in physical space and linear time, and that's who you are, and we are so much more than that.
So how can we enter into this instant of time? It sounds good, but how in the world do you get there? So Pir Vilayat talked about two different moments, one being what he called the moment of time, which means we're in the causal chain between what happened already and what's about to happen, and we're in between those, and that's the moment of time. And he was even saying there's kind of an overlapping of like what we thought we were doing, who we thought we were, where we think we are, and it's kind of a smooth transition from one to the other, and it sure looks like there's a continuity of time. But the other kind of moment that he calls an instant of time is an interruption of this causality by the emergence of a fresh dispensation. Something new enters in. Actually, those of us in a Christian tradition might think about the Holy Spirit entering into the moment, and perhaps there's a miracle that happens at that moment. So it's a dispensation from, you might say, higher realms, but otherwise off of the line that we usually think we're on, that creates an instant of time. The Sufi dervishes, it says here, these are Pir Vilayat's thoughts, the Sufi dervishes treasure the instant of time that does not have any duration and where the forward march of time is suspended. And it's a quote from somebody, Hujwuri, which I'm not sure who this is, but this is in Pir Vilayat's work. There's a sharp sword that cuts the guilt of the past and expectations of the future. So it's up to the adventurers, to the free thinkers that can use this sharp sword to really cut through to the barzakh, is another way of speaking about it, or cut through to the meeting place where the divine meets the manifest, that place that has all the possibilities to it, the place where there is hope and there is there is the realization of the depth of the beingness that we are, that things can change.
Well, with this, I'm thinking about Hazrat Inayat Khan said that human can either be like a machine or like an engineer. And the machine is built in a certain way and just carries out its function, not consciously. Well, we think, well, we're conscious beings. We have free will, but we are limited, Pir Vilayat would say, by our conditioning. Spiritual traditions would say we're playing out our karma, the effects of things that we've done in the past, and if you believe in past lives from previous existences, but we're caught up in that. And in some traditions, the remedy is just to get out of the whole thing. So in Buddhism, it's to get off the wheel of being and becoming. And Pir Vilayat had a wonderful way of talking about this. He said it's to free yourself from the conditioning of the wheel of being and becoming, and then becoming capable of turning that wheel, of being able to consciously participate in how that unfolds and no longer being bound by the conditioning from the past. We don't realize that that's an option that we have. We think, well, we just have to live this all out because we identify with that being ourselves. So we get stuck in our identification with our physical self, but we also get stuck with our identification in time, that we're just at this point in time, and this is what's likely to happen over the next stretch of time. And as we get older, the machinery is going to kind of run down. But that's just one tiny, tiny aspect of who we are. We are beings that exist. Part of us exists, yes, in this time, but most of us exist beyond this time, in realms beyond time. And all of that is us. And we don't have a good way of talking about this simultaneously. We're both experiencing physical reality and manifestation. And if we can awaken to it, we're experiencing an existence that's atemporal. It's outside of this time.
So in my story back with Dave, I'm thinking about the calendar and how that could be changed. You know, I somehow thought of that calendar and thought, well, maybe it has something important message here, because look at this coincidence. It's August 3rd. It's Bob's birthday and Dave's death day. And so that's the kind of impulse that we can awaken and say, well, what is possible here? Okay, well, let's just try it on for size. Maybe this can happen. And that kind of thing is, I would say too, that I feel in something like that, that I am close to the divine, that we can have fun together. We can create something new that's never been before, and let's see what happens. Well, there's something else that we can use, and it's an actual practice that Pir Vilayat gives us. And it's a way of breathing that invites this instant of time. Usually as we're breathing, we're inhaling and exhaling, and we have this continuity that I was speaking about before. We're thinking about what was happening, and it just kind of moves us along to be breathing in and breathing out. But if we hold our breath, this is a way of signifying this slicing through of this sword And it is a suspension of the breath. And it is, if we only hold our breath, there's not a whole lot to that. But if we think about higher realms, if we think about what we know about the Barzakh, think about the unity of the divine and the manifest. That was almost in my little joking thinking about it too, about looking at the calendar, and wouldn't that be interesting if suspending judgment and suspending even our thinking as we hold our breath. So I'm going to invite you to, first of all, we're going to breathe in and out, just our normal kind of breath, and just noticing the flow of time as we are sitting here. So let's go ahead and breathe and inhale and exhale. Okay. Now let's experience this instant of time. You could see it as a flashing or a reaching, slicing, as they're saying with the sword, and opening ourselves to something different, to opening ourselves to the creation, having confidence in that possibility that there can be a creation in this moment. It's like a welcoming in of the new creation, welcoming in of something different that can come in here, and realizing that most of our time, it's like we have our bricks on top of our heads, keeping us from looking up or thinking of anything else. And here we're throwing that off and slicing through and just making that invitation. It doesn't have to be specific. It's saying, enter in, or you could reach to the Holy Spirit and say, this is the moment. So what we're going to do, we're going to inhale and then hold our breath. Let's count. I suppose you could count. Well, I'll count and you can listen, and I'll be counting to 20, and then we'll exhale. Okay. And here's a piece of advice. If you have breathing problems, this might not be your best practice. In that case, don't worry about holding your breath for very long.
Well, and also, if you need to exhale sooner than what Rabani was counting, go ahead and do that. Don't strain yourself.
Okay, so I'll go to 20. All right, so let's breathe normally for a bit. Just feel how the things are connected and all the things seem to be flowing like a stream. It's part of the same stream. Okay, inhale. And hold your breath. I'll count 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll just go to 10. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And exhale. Okay, we'll breathe again. Let's just breathe regularly for a couple minutes here, a couple seconds. And breathe in, and we'll hold our breath for 10. And exhale. And just stay in this moment here, breathing regularly again. Just feeling what might have entered in, what opened to you. What feels different? What feels stimulated? A new possibility, perhaps. So this is a practice that you can take with you and use, individualize it for you, especially in any kind of situations that feel like they're kind of stale, seem the same old, and you want to open up to something new. This would also be helpful to think more about what is in that place of the meeting for you and use that to help to open up to the instant of time. Okay.
And another practice, which we won't do together, but you can try this at home. We've talked previously about Tao wheel, which means harmonic perception. And Pir Vilayat described it as seeing that which transpires behind that which appears. It's the deeper reality of something that we're having a relationship with. So normally we think about Tao wheel as like, let's say we're sitting with a rose, awakening to the archetypal nature of the rose. But I had the thought today that there's also another way that we could work with Tao wheel, and that would be to do Tao wheel across time. So here's just an instruction, but you can try this on your own later. Imagine that you are sitting with an acorn and you're tuning into that acorn and you're realizing that what you see is going to, if the conditions are right and it's planted, is going to turn into a mighty tree at some point. But you can even extend Tao wheel beyond that. So where did this acorn come from? Well, it came from another tree. Where did that tree come from? It came from other trees. How did those trees get to be? They got to be in the course of evolution of plants and so on. So you can just see this whole reality opening up and what's in this just little thing that you're looking at. And then beyond that, you could imagine the subtle levels that this is a manifestation of, like how trees are a part of mysticism and the tree of the Kabbalah. And we talked about fractals last time, their way of interconnecting and so on. But it's like opening up to a whole world extending across time, different times and different realities. So that's something that you can try. But now we're going to shift to the second mystery that we want to cover tonight, which is optimization of light. So what does that mean? Well, it doesn't mean just if you have a 3-way bulb, turning it up to the highest level so the room is brighter. Well, that's nice. That's an increase in light, but that's not what we're referring to here. Optimization of light means that it's an inherent property of existence for there to be an evolution of light, the capacity of light to express more and more of itself in existence. And it's not just physical light. There's so many kinds of light. There's so many lights of the subtle realms. And previously we've talked about awakening to our multidimensional existence, that we exist in other levels of reality. So there's the light of the angelic realm, there's the light of the realm of pure spirit and so on. And all of those forms of light are part of who we are. Well, if you think about fiber optic cable, which is used in high-speed internet, it uses light to carry all the information that's on the internet. So it's a conduit for all this information. Well, we can think of the nature of light, that it is a conduit, so to speak. And what does it carry? It carries the properties of all the divine qualities and the ways that those can be expressed in manifestation. What are we? Well, we're made out of matter, but what is matter? Einstein, E equals mc squared. Matter is a form, can be converted from energy. There's an equivalency there. We could say that we are made out of crystallized light. We actually take in light from the environment. Well, we know that, but we also emit light. Light comes from our eyes. That's been measured. More light comes from our eyes when we meditate or we think of something that makes us feel very clear. And we've all had the experience of being around other people and saying, boy, you really seem all lit up. You seem full of light today. Well, if we had an instrument, we could measure that light is coming. So it's the nature of light to want to be able to express itself more and more. Why is that? Well, the Sufis say that the reason that we have a creation is that the divine being wanted to know him herself and to love and be loved. And the only way that could happen is for there to be a manifestation that could establish a relationship between that manifestation and the divine being. Well, what's the lifeblood of that relation? Light. Light that descends, light that returns. Is it just like a mirror? Same light goes back? No. The light that returns is what's been transformed by our experiences in life. So the divine is getting back. It's like God's fiber optic cable in the subtle realms is carrying this light back from existence to the divine being, so the divine being can have more and more the capacity to know him herself. And that's a never-ending process. We could say, well, why should there be a new creation that happens at every instant? And even Arby says, well, in this new creation, there's a similarity to what's been before. Otherwise, we'd be in big trouble if it was just totally different at every instant. There's a similarity, but there's never a repetition. It's always been changed, at least somewhat. And so in that change, in what emerges in that new creation, now there's more possibilities for that light to come through and be in relationship with other forms of light that are part of every name and form, every atom even embodies a form of light, and everything is in relationship with everything else. And here we can see how all these mysteries tie in with each other. We talked about interconnectedness. We talked about uniqueness. Each of us is a unique expression of light. Each of us is a unique being of light. Each of us is a unique receiver and transmitter of light that is changed through us as we are changed by the light that comes from everything that we are in relationship with. And what's the effect of that? Now there's more wisdom that comes from the experiences in existence. And what happens to that wisdom? It becomes available to the divine being, which satisfies the desire that brought about the creation. But the divine is never wanting to, okay, I've got enough wisdom here, I think I'll just go back to sleep. Is always wanting more furtherance, because there's always the possibilities of what can arise that can't ever have been known ahead of time by even what we think of as God or the divine being. It's an emergent property of existence that comes from the relationship of beings in existence with the divine being in the transcendent dimension, but also in what the Sufis say, the cosmic or horizontal dimension. And what is that? It's all the cross connections of everything in existence with everything else.
Well, it makes a lot of sense in what we've spoken before about that our being changes everything. And, how can that be that, this material self is changing? maybe limited number of things. I can make some art, or I can make meals, but how can it be changing everything? Well, it has to be through light. It has to be through light, and it has to be through what we think of as our realization. And we speak about the Barzakh, about what's happening there, that these transformations that happen to us are stored there. The resurrection body is stored there, and not only that, but is affecting everything through that. Well, it really doesn't make any sense except through imagining that it's coming through light. And so everything you're saying, oh, and also the idea of Svarna that we've studied in the Zoroastrian tradition, which we're told is light being. It is light and it is being. So I think that's pretty much what you're speaking about, is the light being, rather than what we usually think of as light.
Yeah. So we usually think of light as a property of something, and that's true. We're made of that, but light is also the medium of that enables the relationship to take place between beings and the divine. And it's also the, you could say, the carrier wave or the conduit of the way that the divine qualities can be experienced and expressed and transformed in every realm of existence. And there's so much that scientists don't know about light, and they would say that, even as basic as the two-slit experiment, in which light can be forced to act like either a particle or a wave, but until the observation is made, it's really both. It has the potential to be both. And I think there's higher aspects of light yet to be discovered. And Tiller, whom we've talked about before, his research that has shown when you link up subtle energy with physical reality, it changes the possibilities of what can happen. Well, that phenomena happens whenever we have that way of connection through light with another expression of light, which could be another being. It could be something in nature. It could be in the inner level with being we experience in our meditation, or even another level on which we exist. Something is opened up through that. Okay, so let me shift gears a bit here too. How else is there optimization of light? One way of looking at karma, back to the notion of karma, is, okay, we did these things, now we got to pay for it. But if it's good karma, it's nice stuff, but the stuff we don't like, well, I guess we had some bad karma, and that's why all these things are happening. And especially if we have repetitive problem areas in our life that seem to just keep happening, and we can chalk that up to, well, I guess I'm burning through a lot of karma, or in yoga, the term is samskaras. It's the residue of things that have to be burned through different ways of experience. Well, that's one way of looking at it. And I would say that's Newtonian spirituality. And I would say quantum spirituality is, when we think about experiences like that, it's that light is seeking to have a greater capacity for expression. So those situations in which we feel the most constricted and the most reactive is actually our own soul bringing about a synchronicity of events in our life, of circumstances, which, if we really allow a breakthrough to take place, if we really allow what's needed to be carried, and I feel this as I'm saying it right now, the divine, we think of, well, what quality is needed here? Well, that's one way of looking at it, and that's wonderful. But if we can open up that way of connection that quality is going to enable in this particular situation, so much more light can come through. It's opening up a richer level of reality, that instead of thinking, well, we're working through karma, no, we're just like a plant that's been under the soil is moving towards the sun, and it breaks through the soil. It's moving towards the sun. We're moving into situations that are calling upon us to open up something that can bring through a breakthrough of light. And that breakthrough of light furthers what is now possible. And like we've said before, the result of that breakthrough isn't just nice for us. It is, certainly. And maybe we don't have to keep repeating that situation anymore. But what has been freed up from our being able to relate to that in that way now opens up something that becomes available to everything. So a little segue back into last week, where we talked about fractals, and we talked about this self-similarity of a fractal regardless of scale. You can magnify it 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times. It looks similar to what you had before, but it's not the same thing. And we can never see the whole thing because it's infinite. And if you recall, we did a meditation on what I call knots in our fractal. And these knots were energy blockages associated with these repetitive patterns that if we imagine this fractal of our being that's not just sitting there, it's moving through time, but there's these stuck places throughout different times that once we really enable this breakthrough of light to take place, all those knots across time are opened up. And now there's something that is able to circulate through our being that frees up all kinds of things. But once again, it's not just a benefit to us because everything is interconnected with everything else. And we talked about how we can contact any other being through the fractal way of interconnecting within our own being. We don't have to imagine we're sending our consciousness out somewhere into the past or a distant location in space. We can find it within ourselves. That opening now becomes available to everything. So it's brought about a further awakening and degree of freedom of the way that the divinity is experienced in life.
Well, I wonder if we can generalize then to knots that happen in all around us. I mean, difficulties that are affecting thousands and millions of people, like the pandemic, or like political situations, or huge differences in the temperature of the earth.
Well, that's a good question. And I think the best answer I can give to that, well, let me back up a bit, like talking about dealing with a difficult situation. Let's say it's a difficult person and we feel, well, the quality that we need is compassion. And so we open up our hearts and now we feel much more light coming through. It isn't necessarily going to change what that other person is doing. Maybe something will happen 50 years from now with them. We can't be attached to that. And so we're not going to be able to, as individuals, be able to just change some large-scale problem. However, and here's the anyway, that when enough people awaken to the higher nature of their being and can come into a state of, the term we're using is harmonic relationship. We've used relational unity, where we're in a state of connection with something else, where we don't lose our identity, but we're not experiencing the other person, or it can be many people, as separate from us. We're experiencing this rich circulation of light between everyone, and all of these lights reflecting on each other bring about a new presence and insight that no one individual could have had. So there's a collective power in that. When enough people reach this stage of awareness, I think this is the only way that problems that have been intractable throughout history are going to be able to be changed. I think there's going to be new insights that will come about and realizations of solutions that hadn't been thought of. But more important to that, there'll be a collective force of consciousness that's going to be able to bring about a shift in the direction that things are headed. Right now, we have just terrible polarization and division and so on. And the more people dig their heels in on either side, the worse that seems to get. So there's got to be a different way of going about this. We have to be able to open up to bring that subtle energy down into manifestation, be able to be in situations and open up to whatever divine quality is called upon, and also be able to come into relationship with other like-minded people that have a similar intention, which is not a Pollyanna idea, well, let's just have nice thoughts and the world's going to magically become better. No, all kinds of work that needs to be done. Uh, but there is a power in collective consciousness that can bring about global change, and it hasn't hit critical mass yet. But it's the nature of light and the optimization of light that it will come to that. But we can help further that process through what we do, as Pir Vilayat would say, to keep ourselves in trim spiritually, to foster our own awakening, but then to realize that that awakening is not just for us, it's for everybody.
Thank you. I bet you got a practice for us.
Yeah, let's see now. Okay, well, this is a wing it practice, which means we'll see how it turns out. So let's just make an assumption, try it as a hypothesis that it's the nature of reality for light to continually seek its capacity to increase more and more, and that existence got going because of the desire of the divine being to know him herself in a way that could only happen through existence. And everything in existence is a vital part of that, including each person participating in this class. So allow yourself to plug in, so to speak. I mean, if we want to, if for us to be able to have this call, we had to plug our computer into the internet, and each of you had to do the same thing, and we had to get on the same Zoom room for all of this to take place. We had to establish this linkage. So allow yourself to feel a connection with the light that brought about the creation of your being. Murshid talks about that we're rays that come from that divine central sun. So just open to, you are made of that light. You know, we say, well, we're made of starlight, of the stars. We are, but we're made of the light of that divine central sun. We're made of divine light. That is what our being is made of. And that light is expressed in many forms, all the way down to the light of physical existence, which can be formed into matter. And once you can feel that that's the essence of your being now, feel the connection with the source, the divine being that created you, and the longing the divine being has to know him herself through you. So this is now what's carried on this conduit of light. And also feeling your longing for the divine. So you feel like these two ends are somehow coming together. And you maintain your identity, but it's not rigid or separated. And as you do this, you can feel something seeking to blossom, even beyond that reconnection with the source. Something is seeking to emerge. This light that's the essential nature of reality and the essential nature of your being has its own built-in property, but we could say its own built-in desire to be able to become more and more of itself. And how does this happen? This happens through your experiencing your relationship with all the rest of existence, which you're so deeply interconnected with. And you're feeling the longing of everything else in existence to know something of itself that can only come through the light that comes from you, and vice versa, the longing you have to experience all of these different aspects of the divine being. It'd be like seeing some beautiful flowers and you think, well, there can't be any more beauty than this, and then you see, oh, look at these beautiful flowers and look at those, and there's no end to the beauty. So you feel your being become as if you're a horn of plenty, but instead of fruit in the horn of plenty, what is coming from? Light. More light. And instead of thinking that your spiritual journey was about your illumination, you're participating in the never-ending process of the furtherance of the illumination of everything in every level of existence. There's a few lines in an incredible string band song. You get brighter every day, and every time I see you, you give all your brightness away, and it only makes you brighter. Just allow yourself to bask in that light and feel that blossoming of light coming from everywhere, to you, from you, in this lifetime, beyond this lifetime, never ending ocean of becoming light. And what is gleaned from this light? Wisdom. We have each access to a unique part of the divine wisdom, but the totality of the possibilities of that divine wisdom are limitless. And that wisdom comes from the new creation that occurs in every instant. Just take a little time to feel this. And set an intention for the light that you're experiencing right now to continue increasing and increasing and become available to all beings in all times, in all realms. And bringing the light of your being into harmony with the light of the masters and saints and prophets and all the messengers throughout time, and with the light of the angels and archangels, and all the beings working for the transformation of the earth. Pour upon us thy love and thy light. Give sustenance to our bodies, hearts, and souls. Use us for the purpose that thy wisdom chooseth, and guide us on the path of thine own goodness. Draw us closer to thee every moment of our life, until in us be reflected thy grace, thy glory, thy wisdom, thy joy, and thy peace. Amen.
Mhm.